Buongiorno a tutti.
Good afternoon to you all, and welcome to the presentation of the annual report of the Foundation for Subsidiarity. This year, it has focused on subsidiarity and sustainable finance. Why is it important to present the report in the special edition of the Rimini meeting, who is entitled Devoid of Wonder, We Remain Deaf to the Sublime? Because there's a sublime that we can see in finance, in dynamics, institutions, entities which live these events. There's a sublime which is here to stay during the pandemic, and that can be seen now that we are on the verge of recovery. President Draghi said the other day at the beginning of the meeting that there's a bad debt which is squandered, and that there's a good debt which is used for production purposes such as education, research, and infrastructures. Similarly, there is bad finance, which only looks at financial returns, and good finance, working for sustainable development. This finance has a strong social, environmental, and economic impact. That contributes these are the topics that have been discussed in the report, which is why we have decided to present it at the meeting. So first and foremost, let me thank our speakers today, Professor Luca Erzegovesi, Professor of Banking and Corporate Finance at the University of Trento, co-curator together with Mr. Vittadini and myself of the report. Giovanni Fosti, President of Cariplo Foundation, Mr. Fabio Pompei, CEO of Deloitte Italy, Mr. Marco Morganti, Head of Management at Impact Intesa Sanpaolo Group, and connected with us we have Mr. Fabrizio Palermo, CEO and General Manager of Cassa, Depositi e Prestiti. Before giving them the floor, let's look at the video graphics presenting the report. The report on subsidiarity and sustainable finance saw the light in an unprecedented crisis in a recent past, whereby the economy and society as a whole suffered from a crisis. Europe has reacted in different ways. The European Central Bank gave 3,000 billion euro. The European Union is facilitating the use of structural funds, has activated safeguarding clause, and has allocated funds to the most affected countries like SURE, 100 billion euros, and the credit line of the ESM, 240 billion euro, and the European Investment Bank, with guarantees for small and medium enterprises up to 200 billion euros. The Italian government has enacted moratoria on existing financing, new public guarantees on credit lines, and measures for strengthening companies. The European Union has also adopted the Next Generation EU, focusing on the green, digital, and resilient transition that can be obtained through sustainable public and private investments. This year's report focuses on how subsidiary culture, the idea to reach the common good and sustainable development, can support recovery. Reports in the past dealt with the youth in the southern Italy and the youth for sustainable development. But this year's report is focusing on sustainable finance in Italy and throughout Europe. The context is the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations with its Sustainable Development Goals, which you can see here in the slide. The report is divided into 3 chapters. The first 2 chapters focus on finance for sustainable development in Europe and Italy. The third chapter talks about excellent examples. The conclusions drawn by the different authors propose a new model of sustainable and subsidiary finance. Last but not least, there are some remarks by different Italian and international distinguished figures. The first chapter focuses on the new international provisions, the European banking system, the inclusion of climate change in the financing system, the role played by the European Investment Bank and national banks like CDP, and the new tool, impact investing worldwide. Then there's the main key holders, which are big banking groups, the Italian Investment Bank, credit consortia, fintech, and banking foundations. The third chapter focuses on some excellent cases of impact investing, like the one of Intesa Sanpaolo, Arpinge, Fondazione Social Venture Giordano dell'Amore, Fondazione Sviluppo e Crescita CRT, and Cefea Impact Asset Management Company. Worldwide, the report focuses on cases of resilience bond and tropical forest finance facility, green investments in the north and south of the world. Impact investment accounts for over $500 billion worldwide, with a 13% growth in 2019. Since 2006, 8 billion euros have been used, with a 19% growth expected for 2020. The enabling factor of a new model of sustainable and subsidiary finance are connected to the identification of needs, the development of projects, the administrative simplification and strengthening of stakeholders' skills at a local level. The Italian financial system is characterized by different entities, banking and non-banking entities. They all contribute to the common good. This biodiversity is a common characteristic to ensure stability, resilience, and presence throughout the Italian country of the financing system. The architecture of this model is based on the presence of Cassa, Depositi e Prestiti, the Italian investment bank, which uses Italian public guarantees. Then CDP always uses private savings through banks, which are scattered everywhere. And then there's also banking institutions which collaborate with CDP and can implement local development projects and can promote impact investment to create a leverage to develop the different areas. We are living through extraordinary times. This has radically changed the way of living and the way of working together. At a European level, we have now understood the need to take common action with unprecedented financial tools in order to repair the damage caused by the epidemic and to prepare the future for next generation. Hence, sustainable financing is a cornerstone to achieve the future sustainable development of Europe.
Come avete visto,
as you have seen, the report is the result of the contribution of many different people. 27 authors, including university professors and professionals, 12 distinguished representatives of the national and international economic sector who have contributed to the report. My warmest thanks to all of them. The report is 500 pages long. We won't be able to go into details, but let's try to use the time given at its best. Professor Erzegovesi, we've heard about biodiversity in the report. So the biodiversity of the different stakeholders is a cornerstone of a subsidiarity mechanism. How can we nurture and enhance this asset that can be further strengthened in Italy and in Europe? And within sustainable finance, are there any synergies that can further be developed between private and public stakeholders in order to promote real recovery in Italy and worldwide? As we have seen in the report, sustainable financing can contribute to the sustainability of the financing system in different ways. What do they have in common, and how are the different experiences different? What are the underlying principles? I'll now try to give an answer by comparing three different alternative models: the Weber's model, the Kant model, and the Aristotle model. I'm not talking about economists because we economists have a lot to learn from others, from different sectors. In the Weber model, from the sociologist Max Weber, the stakeholders are the managers of major listed companies and the managers of investment funds. They are able to connect means and purposes as efficiently as possible. So the shift from market financing to sustainable financing just implies extending the tasks assigned to managers. So they have to pursue virtuous goals for the society by solving an accountability problem. So the companies will not only have to account for the creation of financial value, but also the creation of social value. And this is all connected to the so-called UN SDG, sorry. Tangible results are assessed by special rating agencies, which give an SDG rating. Weber's managers do what investors ask them to do. On the contrary, in the second model, Kant model, good financing is based on a code of ethics with a code of good conduct on the relations between companies, communities, citizens. So the stakeholders in this case are the organizations applying the code of ethics, which are like ethical banks and ethical asset management companies. And managers then translate these principles into practice, implement them. I will now focus on the third model, the Aristotle model, which, better than the first two, it can express the bottom-up approach. As McIntyre used to say, the moral behavior of a company can be seen in its practices, which are forms of collaboration between men who want to enhance common goals, common principles. So these values are the product of very specific activities. Practices like, for example, medicine or political engagement, or sustainable financing practices such as cooperation credits, giving loans to the members of the cooperative. A practice can flourish only if its members have a reward in implementing that practice. However, practices need to have material, practical resources, and they need to work hand in hand with institutions. In the report, we've seen that all the experiences of sustainable financing, which are bottom-up experiences, have been tailor-made, and they are related to the social companies. They are organizations created to solve people's problems, and they are not created just to provide returns on investment. Therefore, the creation of institutions is a form of moral practice. However, this is not enough on its own. McIntyre is very realistic on that. Institutions work for the common good, but also compete in order to create wealth. However, practices cannot be corrupted because they are implemented by people. Therefore, sustainable financing is based on education and changes reality according to the different circumstances. Now, what are the lessons learned in order to promote sustainable financing practices to promote recovery? Now, the pandemic is generating enormous needs, needing brave answers. This is what has happened in intensive care units, and therefore healthcare operators have been working much more than they had to. And this is the sign of a medical practice which has been key. Banks have also helped the families and companies who had no cash, but they've done so after states have given financial aid. Economy would have collapsed without the emergency measures taken by governments or central banks. These measures accounted for 10% of the GDP in most industrialized countries. So today, public stakeholders are key in managing the pandemic emergency. Banks, central banks and countries, states, have mostly worked together with major banks, whereas smaller banks have played a minor role so far. And now they need to get together in order to grow and to play a more important role. The risk is to reduce the subsidiarity mentioned in the report. However, in Italy, our major banking groups have all been created from the gathering of different cooperatives and many minor banks. And this will continue with the contribution of new partners. For example, BlackRock, the major investment group, is now a partner of Intesa Sanpaolo Bank and has been working with our banking foundations, with which it signed an agreement to become a shareholder of Banca Intesa Sanpaolo. This is just an example. We need to promote the design of new sustainable financing initiatives because the financing, first and foremost, needs practices, people, and quality institutions. Financing on its own will not be enough. So let's get ready to design new and innovative forms of sustainable financing, which will be maybe more digital and maybe less related to specific local communities. An enormous effort will be required from the bottom in order for that to be achieved. Thank you, Professor. I think that we have really understood the need and the emergency to do something as fast as possible and to implement sustainable financing initiatives which are real, subsidiary, and innovative. Now, let's look at the first example. In the report, there are some excellent examples, some virtuous examples, which bear witness of a way to do financing which is the most suitable one. Mr. Morganti, based on your experience, you are now head of management at Impact, Intesa Sanpaolo. How could the major banking groups help the Italian recovery by promoting real sustainable growth in the different areas? And how can the approach that you've been adopting for quite a long time be pervasive?
Thanks to you all. I think it's useful to start by explaining this approach, but I think we should start by quoting Mario Draghi's words as he reminded us of what has worked and what hasn't worked in the programming of Italy, because education, for example, has been overlooked for such a long time, but today it is fundamental if we want to restart really with a protagonist role in this country. The only point I would like to say with reference to Mario Draghi's statement is that there is such a lack of focus on Italian capital, and well, that has been the case in Italy for such a long time, for more than 40, 50 years. This has been the case, and today, now, we have put it at the center of our attention as a key for development to avoid a decline. What about COVID? COVID is the reason why we have started thinking about these issues for the first time, but we should not forget that these are old issues at the basis of all the delays in our country, and actions are needed, especially from the state, because investing in education must be from the state first and foremost. But also subsidiarity can be useful, and subsidiarity is provided by finance, because finance has the title to operate in this world and can favor all these processes through studies and the efficacy of studies. I would like to mention some figures that might have been mentioned already, but for example, I want to mention the fact that there are not many people, not many students that have a degree in Italy. So young adult people between 24 and 35 years, there are 36 graduates in the other European countries. So these are the countries with which we have to collaborate and not just compete. I want to mention collaboration, but we have about 40-50%. So these figures must be changed. The duration of a curriculum for an Italian young person is so that they end the studies with a delay of 2 years with respect to the standard curriculum. All the indicators in this respect are negative. 1/3 of Italian young people must start taking jobs that will delay their progress, academic progress, and so they cannot really invest in themselves. They are managers of themselves, and a manager needs money, needs resources. And so if one is a manager of him or herself, they need money, they need resources, just like when they start their business. And all these indicators relate to the public dimension, subsidiarity, and institutions that were in place before the creation of the Italian state. We have private education based on subsidiary, and this has been done for many years, even before Italy was created. And the bank has a role that it must play. It's not that it should play it, it must play it if it wants to be part of a positive movement that we have to trigger, otherwise we will lag behind. So what is the role of banks? For example, giving access to credit to these young people, because they will have precarious jobs for a shorter time, or they will not need those kinds of jobs. They will be able to afford a decent house, and instead of sharing flats with a lot of other people, as is the case in so many cities in Italy, there are young people studying on the balcony or on crowded apartments, and they don't study well, and so that's a problem, that's an impediment to their academic success. So this is the concept that I wanted to mention, that is dissemination and fertilization of a community where the bank operates. It's not just an external subject, but this subject is at the center of this scenario where Italian people are trying to invest in their education. So giving access to credit to these young people can make a difference. If it could make the difference even just once out of 100 times, that would be already enough. But credit is much more efficient than this. What is the impediment? This is something that is not mentioned in Draghi's speech. Why is this not the case? If the state could give everyone a scholarship or if university education was free of charge, then things would be different. But let's keep these things aside, because these things might not be possible at the moment. Why cannot banks give credit to a university students? Perhaps in the future, these students, once they graduate, they may open businesses and start new activities. They may even compete and defeat the other banks. Where there is fair reason behind this unjust reason, that is the fact that banks cannot provide credit to people that don't have an economic sustainability, they don't have an income, and so that's fair. It's a protection towards those that deposits in banks, because these subjects have the right to count on their money, and that money can be safe insofar as the credit given is safe. And within this system, there are safety procedures, for example, rating models, that do not make this activity possible. But this would be the activity with the highest social value, with the most efficient impact. So we have asked ourselves, how could this be possible in an organic way globally? And we've done this with Banca Prossima. I would like to thank my colleague for citing that. I worked for 12 years on this project, a wonderful project, which is based on a central idea. It's not just an idea now, because it is a bank, and this principle is still present in the bank I am responsible for. So the idea is that for those companies that have maximum social value, there must be the possibility to start initiatives that are organic, that are positive. It's not just that we are a sort of charity institutions. No, we want to invest in a good way and we want to use technical tools. These technical tools are the oldest ever. If you think about what a young person really needs, a young person going to a bank and asking for credit, and the bank says no because that guy doesn't have guarantees. But if his or her father showed up, then that money, that credit could be provided in a normal way and they could aspire to have normal citizenship, which also includes financial citizenship. So to allow for this kind of shift, the bank must allot part of its capital and use it as if, it's not correct to say so, but as if it was a guarantee fund and self-guarantees or makes it possible with this technical tool a fact that otherwise would be considered bad administration. That would be the best efficiency in terms of banking rules, but destruction of social values. This thing makes it possible to give credit to university students just because they are enrolled. But what else would be needed? That's enough. They are enrolled in a program. And so this is now in place in the banking system, but with the current rules, it is not possible within the banks to do this. So here comes the question, what should banks do to exercise a positive social effect? This is not the only way, but it is an efficient way. And that's why Intesa Sanpaolo is going to prepare permanent action. This is not just one-shot initiative. We are going to start a permanent initiative to give credit to university students, and already 5,000 students have taken advantage of this. So if a student is enrolled in any department, any program, there are hundreds of programs, hundreds of universities. Some are more have higher reputation than others, but we consider them equal because that human capital must be supported in the direction they're looking for. Sometimes we say that we need engineers and we don't really need philosophers, but that's a way to say that things cannot be done. But things can be done. Then we also try to work in favor of female workers with babies. There is this big issue of mothers that want to work. We have data from the National Institution of Statistics, and these data are horrible because so many women just stop working because they have a baby, and in the family budget that's a disaster. And there are also women that do not have baby because they want to continue to work, but that's terrible because there are about 100,000 people affected by this, and that's incredible because we have such a low employment for women. And what can be done today? Nothing, because today, according to current rules, there will be no way to give access to credit to women. But if we do what I have mentioned, this fantastic thing can be done, and many other things can be done. For example, now we are granting funding to all the families with children that are going to school so that they can have digital devices and to connect. We don't know how the school year will start, but for sure there will be problems. And so with distance teaching, these tools are necessary because they make a difference between being there and not being there. And so human capital can evolve or cannot evolve in this way. To conclude, I've tried to mention some of the reasons why all this is necessary, and the how is also important. How this can be done to intervene on capital management, to work on objectives that relate to civilization. And the how is really important, but there is a question underpinning all this. What happens when a grant is given to the subjects that do not comply with the features that are needed to get a grant, because what I've mentioned could be considered as something that should be stopped and punished. No, we want to promote this, because we have done this. We have given grants to subjects that didn't have the right to get access to that kind of credit, such as social cooperatives, associations, parishes, and social works of the church, subjects that didn't really have credit merit. You know that Banca Prossima was working with social economics, and that's what they did. So, in fact, this credit line is now the best, 2.5% of credit deterioration. Those that are not technicians might not understand this, but believe me, we have never seen anything like this. The small subjects, the marginal subjects are really most important, and they operate in difficult parts of the countries, and they do difficult things, and for this reason they don't have credit merit, but they did perform in a totally sustainable way. So those things that we have done for them and the credit that was granted for them were not done because of benevolence or because of a charity, but because this is a new way to manage capital to improve the condition of our country. And these things are possible. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Morganti. I think that the role of big banking groups is so important, and it's very clear at this time in history. For sure, the way that you have illustrated is particularly interesting. The example of student loans, for example, is really important, and that's possibly what our country needs most today. Other actors are taking initiatives along these lines, that is considering finance at the service of sustainable development. One of these subjects is Deloitte Italia. We have Dr. Pompei with us. The impact of climate change and the risks for the financial sector are big issues, not just for the private sector, but also for governments. And you have written many articles on the Sole 24 Ore, focusing on the G20 presidency of Italy and the role that Italy will be able to play. Deloitte Italy started the project Impact for Italy. So, briefly, please try and stick to the time allotted to you. What is the contribution that can be offered by private subjects such as Deloitte in the near future?
Buonasera a tutti.
Thank you, and good afternoon to you all. People are extremely aware that the impact of climate change and sustainability is the key challenge. In the Global Risk Report of the World Economic Forum, early 2020, for the first time, environmental and climate issues were a priority in long-term risks. This challenge sees the world of institutions, the world of companies strictly connected. They need to cooperate on a common goal, as in to promote a shift towards a green and sustainable economy worldwide. Never like today, the key words should be investments and sustainability. Mario Draghi has been mentioned quite a lot. He has talked about the need to promote the good debt. You have talked about the different tools made available by the European Union. Now there's the Next Generation Fund, which is a unique opportunity for Europe and especially for Italy. And hopefully, the institutions will be up to the extraordinarily complex task incumbent upon them. There must be a coordinated investment plan which is managed at central level with a limited number of priorities on strategic sectors. And we have already talked about education, but infrastructures and digitizations are also important. These investments must be characterized by sustainability, all of them. This is what is expected. Our chairmanship of G20 in early January should lead to a proposal by Italy whereby sustainability will become a central topic in the international agenda. That should lead to the strengthening of governance. This is on the side of institutions. On the other side, companies also have to play their role. So sustainability, corporate ethics, social responsibility, and transparency are the values that should be implemented by all companies. That requires a major cultural change from us all. The companies that will not focus on these elements in their strategies over the time will be isolated from the market, isolated from consumers, and isolated in the fight for attracting talents. And we see that in Deloitte, where 60% of our employees is under 30. Deloitte focuses a lot on sustainability and sustainability issues. Companies that will not have ethical behaviors will inevitably be isolated from the rest of the market, and the newly graduates will not choose them. These companies will also be isolated from the world of finance. The world of finance will increasingly choose transparent and sustainable companies in its choice of investments. You have already quoted BlackRock. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, wrote a letter last year where he announced that his group would allocate investments only to those companies that are sustainable and transparent. Italy is mainly characterized by a very large number of small and medium enterprises. At a time of serious economic crisis like today, and focusing on sustainability today is an enormous complex challenge. This challenge has to focus on two aspects. One, a cultural revolution. And in this context, let me quote Draghi. We needed to invest first and foremost on the human capital in order to implement a virtuous circle of cultural regeneration. On the other side, public help, public aid is needed. In this case, taxes will be key. That will be key to promote sustainable finance and investments, which are a prerequisite for recovery, especially for small and medium enterprises, and to have our GDP grow. We have just closed an international survey on this. Italy needs to produce more effective incentives, simple incentives, which must be clear and based on automatic mechanisms with a definite timeline that can also be compared to those adopted by other European countries so that we can be competitive in Europe. This is what is needed in order to attract sustainable investments on small and medium enterprises. Deloitte does believe that companies and major groups have to play a major role together with institutions. We will have an investment of over $250 million through pro bono activities, through sustainable investments. In autumn, we will launch our program for 2030. And our goal is to make Italy more competitive with an innovative approach, not only through the activities implemented by our foundation, supporting different topics such as education, which for us is key, but also by supporting our customers, big and small companies, while promoting their shift to sustainable investments, the redesign of supply chains, and production models with an added value. Now, this is an enormous challenge, a very complex challenge. At such a dramatic time, from an economic and healthcare point of view, the economic values, together with the corporate responsibility, transparency, sustainability, will hopefully be the cornerstone of a new cultural revolution, which will lead to long-lasting effects, even in the economic and financial sectors. Thank you, Mr. Pompei. Thank you for what you're doing, for what Deloitte is doing in Italy. Deloitte is definitely a major player for us. And thank you for these words of hope for the future. This report also shows very clearly the role played by Cassa Depositi e Prestiti, the Italian investment bank, in the future, which can be the pillar of a sustainable subsidiary and sustainable financing system. We asked Mr. Palermo, what is the role of Cassa Depositi e Prestiti in sustainability, and what has been the impact of the epidemic, which is still underway, and what are the tools that Cassa Depositi e Prestiti will be using in order to promote a sustainable development in the country?
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for inviting me on this session on the finance and sustainable development. This is a very dear subject to our institution. Cassa Depositi e Prestiti, CDP, has always been oriented to sustainability. For more than 170 years, we have been promoting community finance, close proximity finance, collecting families' income to reinvest in it into administration and other activities. We basically gather resources from the community to reinvest in the community. I normally summarize our activities in these terms. We invest in Italy, in innovation and in education to support infrastructure and companies. Over the last few years, the action plan has been expanded considerably to face the increasing complex challenges at the global level. That is, the mega trends that are changing business models, for example, innovation, digitization, energy transition, and climate change, the growth of development countries, and social changes. On the basis of these mega trends, in December 2019, we approved an industrial plan that will mobilize up to 200 billion in a few years. We have used the 2030 UN Agenda developments to promote a sustainable model that is resilient and inclusive. Alongside with sustainability, we have based our plan on two more pillars. One is the community, to be closer to local subjects, and the other is to work as a system to create synergies with local authorities, companies, and the main institutions. The pandemic has accelerated these ongoing mega trends and especially has emphasized the vulnerability of the current economic system. So all this makes it all the more urgent to rethink completely, we believe, the development model towards sustainability. Within this context, the CDP group has tried to be closer to the community, supporting companies and local authorities with measures that were started in a very short time. As regards companies, we made 6 billion liquidity available, direct and indirect liquidity, 4 billion guarantee for export and internationalization, and we also supported the local authorities performing one of the most important renegotiations on mortgages, committing 1 billion resources to the benefit of more than 3,000 local authorities. This is an unprecedented effort. Then we approved an extraordinary plan for non-repayable aids, 25 million non-repayable aids. These are for this is a small action, but it is very symbolic because for the first time in its history, CDP created a plafond for non-repayable aid to the benefit of the community. In addition to these emergency measures that were activated immediately, we are working with the Ministry of Economy and Finance to bigger initiatives, that is the relaunch patrimony. And we're going to support with capital the patrimonialization of companies with a special attention to sustainability. Sustainability stands at the center of our industrial plan, and our commitment goes beyond the contingent measures adopted after the emergency of the COVID-19. So as I said before, there must be a complete rethinking of the concept of development. And as the CDP, we have already started this project, and the pillars we want to use concerns both our internal and the external operational activities. In particular, we have identified 5 areas. The first is finance, that is a key factor to enable things, but it is not enough on its own. Then the corporate strategies, then people, then structure and processes, and finally digital technology. Finance must be oriented to create values, not just for shareholders, but for all the stakeholders. For this reason, we have strengthened our role of issuer of sustainable bonds. We've issued 5 times for 3.5 billion with great appreciation on the part of the market. The last of this issuing was the COVID bond, 1 billion, with which we have supported companies and communities that were mostly affected by the pandemic. As regards the other pillars, a key role is played by corporate strategies. In fact, we believe that sustainability must become a guideline for development, especially for those sectors that can convert their business models. In CDP, as I said, we have built our industrial plan on sustainable development objectives of the UN Agenda 2030, and we have promoted projects with high content in technology with the companies of the group in the field of energy efficiency, circular economy, and telemedicine. Another fundamental pillar is constituted by people. They have to be made aware of the social and environmental impact of their work. Infrastructure and processes must also be adjusted to meet the challenge. Within the CDP, we have changed our bylaw to include sustainable development in our scope of action, and we have created internal infrastructures, a new area of sustainability to integrate these principles within our corporate culture. This has led us to change processes too, to include sustainability assessments already in the planning stage of the initiatives that then we will finance and support. This way, our first sustainability report has been created. We are very proud of this, and we have summarized here the impact generated by all these initiatives. As regards digital technologies, finally, we believe these are a fundamental factor for sustainability. In CDP, we have invested considerably over the last 2 years for digitization and technological upgrading. These investments enabled all the staff to continue to work in smart working, preserving their operational activities during the lockdown. We're also working on other projects at a national level, among which we are promoting an advanced digital network for the country. As shareholders of TEAM and Open Fiber, we can play an important role here, and we can also create national system for payments, such as collaboration with SIA, that is leader in Europe. We are also collaborating in the public-private initiatives in the terms of cybersecurity. Some more figures to conclude as regards our activities in 2019 in terms of sustainability. Our investment stand for 2.4% of the GDP. We reached more than 20,000 small and medium enterprises. We have created 600,000 jobs thanks to direct and indirect impact. We have financed more than 600 social facilities, of which there are 365 schools, basically one per day. Finally, we have built 1,500 social housing and 1,600 beds in dorms for students. Since 1850, we have considered sustainability a pillar of our activities, and in the future, Cassa, Depositi e Prestiti will continue to invest more and more in a more sustainable Italy. Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to thank Dr. Palermo for these detailed and comprehensive answers, and especially for the contribution that Cassa, Depositi e Prestiti is making right now. Now, let's move to the final presentation in this session. So it is the honor to introduce President of Fondazione Cariplo, Giovanni Fosti. I would like to talk about the role of banking foundations for the future of the country. We believe in this very much. We wrote it in the report as well. We believe that truly they can play a fundamental role. How is Fondazione Cariplo managing this as financing subject that is patient and that is consistent with its own administration? And what are the factors that should be considered to promote recovery in promoting the communities?
Thank you. I will make 4 remarks, as we're a bit late. But first of all, let me say that banking foundations work on a long-term basis. When we talk about sustainability, we talk about a long-term approach. And therefore, inside the underlying principle is that we have to give importance to the future. We don't have to solve problems today just for the sake of solving them, but because we need to solve the problem for future generations. So our horizon is long-term, not just short-term benefits are important, but especially long-term benefits are key. And this is an underlying principle which must be the focus of all different decisions. Now, foundations, banking foundations approach finance as long-term investors. And this is a value in itself, and it's an asset. The second characteristic is that foundations work for the community. Their role is also to understand what the role of the state and the market must be. This is a lively debate today. We often compare the advantages and disadvantages of both. We should understand where is best to use the market and where is best to use the state. In this debate, we don't have to forget that there is a third stakeholder, a third pillar, as in the community itself. Without the community, it would be difficult to get out of the existing situation. So to look at the future ahead, we need very effective solutions also promoted by the community. In order to do that, first and foremost, we need to trust the community and on the ability of the community to generate resources and value. So the community is not someone passive, but a stakeholder with which we can and need to work. So the Cariplo Foundation during COVID has implemented different initiatives during COVID. Cariplo Foundation has reviewed its investment for 60 millions, and has also shifted resources to the community foundations, to the 16 community foundations operating in Lombardy. They were directly allocated resources that were managed by them. The Cariplo Foundation has therefore reviewed its plans, and Lombardy has collected funds through the regional foundations. It collected up to 50 million euros. Therefore, that means that we are able to generate resources from the communities which have an enormous potential. Now, the fourth remark is what the Cariplo Foundation is doing on impact investing. Our tradition goes back to the distant past, when it started to deal with social housing, as in to create housing opportunities in an inclusive way. And we could do so by using two different leverages: a financial leverage and productive leverage, as in we were able to manage finance for social housing, and we were able to do so in a very strict way by focusing on sustainability. On the other hand, we worked hand in hand with the community, so that we could involve the most frail people, and we could promote the social cohesion in order to ensure sustainability. We always have to remember that when talking about impact investing, this is the pillar. We need to combine two very different but complementary elements, and they're both necessary. On the one end, great technical and financial skills. On the other, great connectivity and connectivity skills. The problem is not just to produce and allocate, but also put everything together, put together all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. This is very complex to do, but this is the easiest way to manage things, and that can only be done by the community. So, without the community, without a proactive role played by the community that can promote social innovations, impact investing could be much less effective. I think that this is the way to go for financial for impact finance, as in it has to be as inclusive as possible in order to overcome social inequalities. Thank you, President Fosti. Thank you very much for being so short. What you said is very interesting. You talked about community impact investing. The example given by Fondazione Cariplo and what it has done can be very useful for Italy at this time. To conclude, we have talked about the fact that sustainable development is also based on dedicated to sustainable development, subsidiary and sustainable finance, which today increasingly has social, economic and environmental impacts. As President Fosti has just said, and as all the speakers have said today, a finance that can help a balanced evolution of all social, economic and environmental dimensions. There are many different examples underway. Today, we have talked about some important examples. The report talks about many more examples and also proposes a new way of subsidiary and sustainable finance that will hopefully be increasingly promoted in the future. Unfortunately, we couldn't get into details of the 500 pages of the report, but in September, we will be presenting the report in different Italian cities. Those of you who are interested to see the presentations, we will be organizing different meetings, so just get in contact with us. Thank you very much once again to all the different speakers today, and thank you very much to all of you who have been following us. Thank you and goodbye.